Husker fans expecting a lot from Scott Frost. 4 wins, then 5, but will 2020 be the big breakout? We got Chris Wall on the line from Husker Hype to break down Nebraska's roster for 2020 and get us set for the big season. Chris, how you doing today?
Hey, doing well. Thanks, Mark.
Appreciate you doing this, and I'd like to dive into some Nebraska football. So starts with Adrian Martinez. He counted for 25 touchdowns total 2 years ago, got nicked up. That obviously compromised his game. Still, with the number of playmakers they had around him on the perimeter, you would have expected a little bit more out of the offense. I think he had 3 touchdowns his final 6 games. Your thoughts about Martinez and the quarterback situation?
Yeah, Martinez was definitely not himself last year. It was kind of hard to watch sometimes. You watched him his true freshman year, and he would just take off, and he just really didn't have that first step. He didn't seem very decisive throwing the ball, so it was tough to see in his sophomore year. So maybe a little sophomore slump. Hoping that an improved offensive line and a couple more targets on the outside, taller targets, maybe will help him improve this next year.
Chris, do we expect him to get pushed for the starting job? Of course, there wasn't spring ball for somebody to have that opportunity to step up, but with 4 weeks in August, as is projected right now, do we expect him to possibly get a run for the #1 job?
I mean, I think a lot of people hope so and expect it. Frost has voiced that it's going to be a competition, and Luke McCaffrey there right behind him definitely wants to be there and wants to play. So I 100% expect it to be. I hope it is. And at the end of the day, I hope that if Adrian is the guy, he's the best guy out there. So
McCaffrey, obviously highly touted. We know the lineage there, and Noah Vedral has moved on. Dedrick Mills, big game player at Georgia Tech, had a nice bowl game, and then the transfer to Nebraska. He played better down the stretch, set us up at running back and on to wide receiver as well, minus J.D. Spielman, of course.
Right. Love Mills. Big pounder. Really came on the second half of the year. He had some ball issues, ball security in the first few games, really shored that up, and he's definitely in line to really push, I think, for maybe 1,000-yard season this year. So yeah, love Mills. JD's departure was tough. I think Wan'Dale Robinson is one of the most dynamic players in all of college football. So watch for him.
Yeah, so Robinson caught 40. He's listed as a wide receiver, but they give him a lot of carries out of the backfield. He had 340 yards rushing. So with Mills being the big bruiser in the middle, do we expect they're going to continue to use Robinson as a runner?
I hope not. I really hope not, because it was really tough watching him take carries between the tackles and just get pounded in there. And the thing is, we didn't have much with Mo Washington's departure kind of there in the middle of the year. He had some legal issues. We had really no choice but to give Wan'Dale some carries. So this year I hope Wan'Dale, and I think Wan'Dale will be a true slot guy, maybe taking some jet sweeps as far as handoffs go, but not running up the middle for him. No.
So minus J.D. Spielman, one of the best playmakers in the Big Ten. Wan'Dale Robinson's there. Yes, 40 catches. That could increase. Jack Stoll at tight end, but going to 3 and 4 and sometimes 5 wide receiver sets. Who are vying for those spots?
Yeah, so I hope they get the tight end more involved. Stoll would be great to get him more involved. And then you look at the wide receiver, and just the scary thing about wide receiver is there's just so much there's not so much returning production, right? JD's gone. The only really returning production you have is Cade Warner. And then there's a lot of talent coming in. Whether that pans out or not, is another thing. So you think about the guys coming in are Omar Manning, Betts from Omaha, and Alante Brown. There's Jamie Nance. Nixon is a true freshman coming in. There's a couple other guys. There's just a lot of young wide receivers. It's just whether they're going to pan out or not. So,
talking Nebraska football, we got Chris Wall on the line from Husker Hype, breaking down the 2020 roster on both sides of the ball. Offensive line, obviously, the tradition is huge. That's always been a strength, not necessarily the last few years, though. How do we look along the offensive front?
The line looks to be a lot better. You got Brendan Hymas there on the outside, which he's definitely one of the best offensive linemen we've had in a while. And then across the board there, a couple of juniors, senior, so a lot more experience, which we haven't had in the past few years, kind of just throwing guys out there and throwing them into the fire, obviously including redshirt freshman who Cam Jurgens, who started at center last year and had a lot of issues with just high snaps and whatnot and kind of throwing off the timing. So really think the offensive line should be improved.
So, Chris, I'm guessing that one of the bigger possible problem areas on the team might be defensive front, because you had Carlos Davis, Khalil Davis's brother. Darian Daniels was a playmaker. We mentioned Khalil, 11 tackles for loss and 8 sacks. Those guys are gone. Most of the productivity from the defensive front gone.
Yeah, definitely going to miss the Davis twins. Darian Daniels too. We do have Damian Daniels, younger brother. Big kid, should get in there and get a lot of playing time. And then you have the kid from Arizona, Ty Robinson, another big guy, and Ben Stilley should really come on this year. Jordan Riley's another one I think to really watch for. We had a lot of JUCO guys come in this past class, and Jordan Riley is a JUCO guy, big kid that should play, I think. And the other kid from last year, Jakeem Green, another JUCO transfer. So just a lot of JUCO guys, I think that they're going to try to work in there and throw in there and see what works for them.
Muhammad Berry gone, but JoJo Doman's back on one of the most productive linebackers in the Big Ten. Secondary linebackers, if you look at most of the defensive metrics, whether they be the traditional stats or the advanced metrics, Nebraska has a lot of work to do on defense. What do you think of the linebackers and secondary?
I like the linebackers enough. Kind of some question marks. You got Colin Miller returning there, senior, and I really like Will Honus, really sound, fundamental guy. Trust his eyes, plays really well, great gap integrity, especially in the run game. Like Will Honus. JoJo Doman, he's a big time athlete, loves to hit, aggressive, always in the backfield. So really like where JoJo will be this year. Secondary is pretty young on the corners. Got some young guys out there, a couple of sophomores, Braxton Clark, Quentin Newsome, Miles Farmer. And then at safety, you're looking at Deontay Williams, who got hurt very early in the year last year, was scheduled to start. Deontay Williams would be back there at safety. And then another senior corner, DiCaprio Boodle. So, I mean, the secondary is big, lengthy, fast, likes to hit. So I think we should be pretty good there.
So, Chris, the place kicking was a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
You're going to play some close games, or so you hope, this season. And it was something that cost this team early on against Colorado in particular, and some other games. There are 6 different kickers who attempted a field goal last year. We know that some of that came from ineffectiveness, but there was also injuries factored in there. Is one guy going to be the guy, or is that yet to be determined?
It's 100% yet to be determined. I can't even tell. I couldn't even name all the kickers we have on the roster right now. I think they brought on maybe 5 or 6 different guys just because they're not going to deal with not having a kicker again. I mean, last year it was the scholarship kicker, Barrett Pickering, who was injured. And then they brought on a kid from the soccer team that kicked the game winner against Northwestern. So they brought on a bunch of talent this year. One of, I think, a kid from Australia too, to maybe do the punting duties. So it's going to be 100% open season there, and see who's the best at it.
Chris, you mentioned off the top the brutal schedule, and most of that's late October into November. You're going to have to get the wins early, put them in the bank toward postseason play, and then hope that this team is improved and matured to take on the Ohio States and the Iowas and everybody else on the schedule. It is loaded. Penn State involved as well. This team under Mike Riley missed postseason his last season. Frost hasn't delivered a postseason berth the first 2 years. So what does success look like for Nebraska football in 2020?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, and I think a lot of the fans don't like my response. I think that 6-6 is what they should be capable of and shooting for. I think they're capable of 7-5, and I think that if they have a really good season, everybody does what they should do. I think that they're capable of a high ceiling, of 8 wins. But 6-6 with that schedule should really be what they're shooting for, because the first half of the season those games are winnable, but there's a lot of games in Nebraska's past few years that have been winnable, and they just haven't figured out a way to do it. And then that second half of the year, especially towards the end, if you think about any hopes in the West, you play at Iowa, you play at Wisconsin, at home for Minnesota. So that's Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and we haven't beat Wisconsin in 5-6 years, Iowa in 3. So yeah, got to get those wins there at the beginning.
Because you got to think, to be realistic here, Illinois, Purdue, Nebraska, Northwestern are kind of in that same. They're in a group, and Northwestern's kind of an oddball in that they won the division with an 8-1 record 2 years ago, and then they fell flat at 3-9. But we would expect a typical Northwestern 7-win team, something in that range. So you got a lot of teams right there. So I would think before Nebraska can take its shot at Iowa and Wisconsin, and now what might be Minnesota near the top. We'll see if they stay at that spot. You got to beat the teams that are in that group, that Purdue, Illinois, Northwestern group, and beat them consistently. And you would like to see something that I don't think we've seen Scott Frost 2 years, and jump up and beat somebody. You're not going to run through Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Man, that is brutal at the end of the schedule. You're not going to run through that, but beat somebody at an upper echelon, break through, and have that one big win. And the early indicator, as you well know, Chris, is even though it's not a Power 5, the Cincinnati team coming to town's no joke, and that's going to be a big test.
Right. I think a lot of people are saying, Nebraska should start off 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, and it's just those first 4 games, there's not really a single game besides maybe Central Michigan at home that I would give much north of 50% chance right now. Purdue, they've been giving us problems the past few years. Then Central Michigan, and then who is it after that? South Dakota State. They have a recipe for beating Power 5s early in the season. And then obviously, Cincinnati they're dynamic. They play fast, and that's going to be a close game. That's definitely going to be a good game. So I really think that if Nebraska can even go 3-1 in those first 4, that's success, I think, to me.
Yeah, to your point, I don't think people really understand, because you bring in Frost, he's the favorite son, he goes 12-0 or 13-0 at UCF, and you expect things to turn around quickly. But man, against this schedule, and considering what Nebraska has, 6-6 would be an accomplishment to get to postseason play against this schedule, because you got to figure those 5 down the stretch. If you go 1-4, you can't be real happy with that, but that's somewhat reasonable. 2-3 would be a tremendous accomplishment, I think, against Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, if you win 2 of those games. And coming out of the gate, as you mentioned, Purdue's not a gimme, Northwestern, Illinois, Cincinnati. These games are basically 50-50 propositions depending on where they're played. So 6-6 is going to be an accomplishment, and then maybe look for the big breakthrough in 2021.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that Frost was quite ready for what Big Ten play going to throw at him. I'm a big Frost guy. I'm a big believer. I want to give him as many years as he needs to build this thing, because it's definitely taken a little bit longer than he thought. But I agree, 6-6. Keep moving up from there. Keep getting these big guys in, develop them, and do what you want to do and run your offense.
Yeah, like you, I'm definitely not ready to pull the plug. I think he was the right hire for a number of reasons, and we'll see if he can get it going here in 2020 against a brutal October and November. Mm-hmm. All right, Chris Wall on the line from Husker Hype. Please join him and the rest of the staff there on Twitter. Chris, we appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, appreciate it, Mark. Nice talking to you.